Hello and welcome. I'm Maria Ressa, and this is Hold the Line. You know what we've done in this show in the past is talked about the values and how you make them a reality, right? Like how you just don't get pushed back. And oftentimes it is about standing up to governments. We know where this has come from. Standing up to big tech. Timnit Gebru, our last one, talked about ethics of generative AI, for example, right? But I wanted to bring you something else, which is, how do you actually make these values that you want to live by a reality in a world that just seems to want to crush them? There's no better couple to talk about this than Kiddo and Amy Cosio, because not only have they created the world, they have built a sustainable business around it, and they have expanded an entire, I'm going to call it a commune, but let me take away the negative meanings. And then really, truly, the community they have built in La Union. Kiddo and Amy Cosio, welcome to Hold the Line.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's our pleasure.
So tell me, what is it? What is the vision? What is the value that encompasses your vision of your life?
So we run a coffee company, and it was very much like the dream of, a lot of people have the dream of having their own little quaint coffee shop. And funny enough, that was not really a dream of ours. It was more of just an idea. But the driving force behind that idea, eventually, as it turns out, was the phrase para sa tao, or for the person, or for in the service of humans. And the first humans that the company was set up to serve was us and our family. And at the time, we had one baby and another on the way when we decided we would kind of tune out of the urban narrative that we were in and almost downgrade our OS, our operating system, and choose a rural one, choose a provincial one. And when I say a rural provincial one, I'm not talking about La Union, where we're from in 2023. I'm talking about this, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, when it wasn't a tenable business venture to go to LU. Like it was truly a human aspiration to spend the day with our child. That's all that the company was built on, that one couple could spend time with their baby. And as time went on, that became enshrined as a value that this company was for the people. First, of course, it was first us. There were no other people to speak of. But as the company grew and as the culture began to thrive, we started to see that we didn't want to just hold those aspirations for ourselves. We didn't just want to safeguard our own human existence. It was more meaningful when it was shared. If everyone in the company could have access to their time and have a living wage and have a happy day-to-day life at work with each other, we just had this hunch and it's not a crazy hunch when you frame it that way, that it's a good way of running a company, to look out for each other, to kind of build into the enterprise model human care and make it an infrastructure for thriving. And I think that that's what we're about. Para sa tao, or in the service of humans, informs how we make coffee, how we source it, how we treat our crew, how we treat ourselves, how we manage our time, how we make clothing and envision the future of our products. So it's always around people in the context of the world and ecosystem.
Most businesses will say this, right?
Right.
They will actually always say, but in the end, a capitalistic system gives the rewards to the people who throw the money in, and then the people who are paid the lowest are the ones at the bottom. But let me take it out of the business part and bring it back to the values that you have, Amy. Was this a pipe dream? How did you guys decide to go to a place all the way, leave the lives that you knew? You were, of course, a missionary from a relatively privileged background. You were an educator, e-teacher. So how did you shift it? What was the plan?
I think at first we were really just avid surfers. We wanted to.
I like that it starts there. Okay, you were surfers with a baby.
We were dating. Well, first we were dating. There was no baby yet.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we fell in love with La Union. It was very easy to go to. You take a bus. We're both from Quezon City, so the bus stations are one tricycle ride away, and then you hop off and you're there on the coast, and you get to have an amazing time at the beach, spending so little. And that was kind of our wake-up call to tell ourselves, oh, you don't need to be paying for parking, buying this, buying that, comparing it to life in Manila, where everything, you are either a producer or a consumer, and you're not just yourself.
You're not a being, right? You're not a creature. You're what you make.
That's what La Union represented for us early on, like 2009, 2010. And eventually we got married and we were like, we want to be based from this place where people treat you like if you want to go out and play in the water, that's just as urgent and important as going and making money or spending it in the mall.
And that's a lesson I think that La Union taught us. Like a lot of people tend to frame our story as something we did to La Union.
Right.
But we would never have thought, like we were visiting La Union for years before we started a business there because it wasn't that viable for business, unlike as it is today.
But you actually did
Yeah.
ship, change La Union with the business that you
I think so.
Yeah.
But it started from this concept of, I wrote it down, that it was just enough for us. Like it was enough for us to have little. I'll be honest with that. And you mentioned privilege. We're constantly calling out our privilege. We're constantly operating from a place where we know that there is this charade that we're all born into, this invisible, almost caste system, especially in the Philippines, where it's so stratified. And it's almost known that there's habitats and strata, and you don't cross those habitats, right? And we were like, why not, right? Why can't we settle for less?
You were not only a missionary, you also have a financial background. Right?
Well, I'm the son of a man with a financial background. I'm very much a divergent in a career sense. Like I've never really, like personally, I didn't finish school, but I had the freedom to drop out precisely because of privilege, right? And my question to myself has always been, what are you gonna do with that though? And I think that that's all we can ask of each other. Like, yeah, there's so many options for the privileged, but what are you gonna do with it in a capsule? Like even with the smallest case study, like with a tiny coffee shop, what are you gonna do?
So you go to La Union. What are the values that you made real, and how did it grow?
The first one was the 3 to 6 break.
Yeah.
3 p.m. to 6 p.m. break?
Yeah. So
Okay.
we opened a
We
coffee
can't
shop.
do that.
And
Go.
immediately we said, we're open from 8 a.m.
To 3 p.m.
to evening, but we're closed 3 to 6. And everybody was upset. Like, I need my coffee at 4 p.m. I mean,
It's
like
the
it's a
last
very
coffee to
Pinoy
end the day.
thing.
Yeah. Like to finish the work day, I need coffee at 3 or 4
Yeah.
to like get me to bedtime.
And it
we were
became a
shutting.
value because we had moved to La Union precisely to watch the sunset every day. And our shop was across the highway. And we said, if we can't watch the sunset and be on the beach for this prime time of seeing the sun go down, then why are we here? Why are we doing business?
And for a fraction of what our theoretical paycheck might have been if we had exercised our privilege elsewhere, right? So we were like, it was very logical to us. Like we started this business to be a family, to spend time with each other, precisely because Manila didn't afford us time. It affords you a lot of things, but not time.
Right.
And we thought the first thing that we're gonna assert is our time. And so it doesn't matter if we're getting negative reviews. We're gonna shut at 3. We're gonna spend time at the beach, and we'll figure it out later, which we did. And that lasted for years. That was our first core value.
maybe
It's like
2 years. Yeah.
I think 2 years. Like we were shutting the gate, and people would be coming for coffee, and we're like, sorry, we're back at 6. Yeah.
So para sa tao, you said,
Yeah.
para sa tao, for the people, right?
Yeah.
And you run a company that literally, puts all your salaries in place, right?
Yeah.
You run a company
We're transparent.
Right. How does this work with human nature when there's jealousy or how do you pull this together? You also, Kiddo, when we were talking, like you want to encourage your employees to set up their own, to learn and to set up their own companies. How does this win-win play out?
Well, I think Ami can speak more technically about it, but I'll set it up. Like it starts with just being in constant movement, asking questions constantly, listening and expressing. And if you're coming from that premise with the correct prompt, right? I think that us humans, we're organisms. Like if we're doing our job right, it's going to be a virtuous setup. Like it's going to lead to the right place. And so
think,
our labor.
Para sa tao, we start with we are human. So we're very clear about like our needs and our wants. And we treat other people like they have needs and wants. And I think something that is not so common in business is that the owners and the founders or the bosses acknowledge their staff's needs and wants. And in the same way that if I am allowed to aspire for it, you must also be allowed to aspire for it. And that's something that was very, I would say, seemed like common sense to us because we came from a different background. We weren't, we didn't go to management school. So that it just seemed like if we're going to be living in this place and living our lives in this community, we have to see people for the entirety of their humanity, not just for their labor hours, not just for how they work as a cog in the machine, but like you'll see that they have a parent abroad, they have they're a single mom, and those are things that you can't look away from. In the same way that you want people to see you and what you're trying to do.
And how does that affect how you run the business?
It just, it solves so many problems in the realm of trust.
Right.
Because when you're vulnerable, even when you have the power,
Yeah.
people are gonna wanna also be vulnerable.
The speed
But
of trust.
also, they're happy to give you their trust because they'll see where it goes.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we don't, we try not to speak so much of like, Filipinos will abuse their freedom.
We try not
People
to
will
say
take
that, yeah.
advantage of you. Even customers that are a bit rude, like we experience it weekly.
Yeah, daily almost.
Yeah, but we don't like to speak of it because they're the minority. And the bigger story needs more airtime, which is most people want to be good. Most people want to work and work honestly.
I think that's a big newsflash moment for business people because that's a common question that people get. Oh, how do you guard against abusing the trust? And I always flip it back at people and say, have you even planned for the scenario that people rose up and met your expectations?
Oh, yeah.
Did you ever prepare for the scenario where good people might actually work for you and they're not trying to skulk around and get away with stuff?
Right.
Right? And what makes you as a privileged person think that you're more predisposed to behave than a person who isn't privileged when they're probably wasting less money than you are on a daily basis? And growing up in the matrix of privilege, and I love calling it out because we're so afraid to call it out. And it's bullshit. Like, sorry, Maria, to curse on the show, but it's just, we know it because we went to school, because we are privileged to have access to information and ways of thinking and people that can give us good ideas. And we look at the world and we point the finger, oh, if only this was better, if the government did that, if they did that, if they did this. And we have these companies at our disposal, and we're not right-sizing true cost. We're not looking at true cost of living and adjusting our wages. We're still trying to make them do more for less.
Yeah.
And that's seen as value.
Right. That's good business.
That's considered good
right?
business.
This is where capitalism
But
has
it
gone
makes you a
wrong.
bad creature of an environment. And that's why ecological thinking is another core value that we've kind of actualized over time. The more we look at the natural order, the more we have a clue as to how we can build a business. And in the natural order, there is an inbuilt sense of trust, regulation, distribution, and value. If you look at a forest,
Yes.
right, the network of those things is extremely complex. It's a better design than anything that capitalism or commercialism has created. And yet we keep looking at these 200-year-old mechanisms, which are relatively young in the age of in the grand scheme, in
Yeah.
the cosmic
Yes.
scheme of things. And I hate to sound like a hippie with a commune, but that's what it is. If you take a broad
Which is what your
view.
parents said about
Yeah.
what you built. Okay,
Yeah,
go.
and
go.
parents will always say that, especially coming from the realm of privilege. But if we take our cue from older systems,
Yes.
ecological systems, forests.
which we have destroyed.
Yeah, if we look at time and space
Yeah.
and use our privilege, you went to school, right?
Yeah.
So use your school
Yeah.
and analyze problems using your privilege. We're not asking you to do something over the moon. Just use your education, right? Use your standpoint. If you're watching Rappler, yeah, you're probably privileged. Let's just call that out every step that we have, every chance that we have, right? You're probably privileged. I'm speaking in English. You're probably privileged, right? So the question is, what are we doing with it?
Yeah.
Are we just sitting there and wagging our fingers? I actually, politically, we're not where we want to be, right? But I have 6 to 8 working hours a day if I'm in a humane environment where I get to provide an answer with the limitations that I have, and I'm sure I'm privileged, but I'm not as privileged as a lot of people out there too, right? And there's a lot of people there who need to kind of look at it with the intelligence that they claim to have and engineer a new way, because time is ticking, the world is on fire,
Yep.
democracy is being challenged harder than I've seen it in my lifetime.
There are more autocracies
And-
now.
Yeah.
72% of the world is under autocratic rule.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so my question to the privilege, my question to the business sector, it's not just about your vote.
Yeah.
It's about the 3 years of how you treated your staff, how you used your privilege at work, right?
That actually builds,
Builds,
this country
yeah.
bottom up, right? Like,
Yeah. Otherwise we live with these natural aggressions. Like, of course they're going to look at that and see, well, he makes 100 times more than I make. So how can he possibly understand my plight, right? We make it a point, while, like we said, privilege is our byword. We make it a point to also live our lives with our team. Like, we have a staff meal every single day, eating from the same pot as all of our crew. We allot for, that's a big part of our corporate culture, to eat together. And that statement, religion brings that, religion's metaphor is the
does.
table.
And
right?
religion becomes,
Yeah.
faith becomes even more important in a world that technology has torn
Sure,
apart.
sure. I mean, I used to be religious. Like you said, I used to be a missionary, and seeing the corruption and seeing the back end of the religious machine,
Yes. Power
and its
and money.
and its collusion with politics and
Yeah.
its collusion with business, it made me think. It made me creative. It made me rebellious and creative. It made me think, well, F this S.
Right.
I don't, like, there's something wrong here, and I haven't, I have an idea of what to do,
Yeah.
and maybe I should just try it. And that's all that we're doing. We're not doing anything crazy. We're just putting our values where we say they are.
10
That's
to
all.
15 years later,
Yeah.
what made it successful? And you're very modest, but it actually has transformed La Union to some degree, right?
Yeah,
Like,
we
what
are.
made it successful?
We are aware of the catalytic effect that, and we're not alone. A lot of coffee shops do act as kind of the beacon for gentrification, right?
Right.
Like, that happens globally, and then they start getting utilized by bigger companies to further gentrify. But 10 to 15. Sorry, what is the question, Maria? I should.
What the impact of the company on
Yeah.
on this? What made you
Yeah.
successful?
I think that there's no one way to say, like, I don't want to be prescriptive.
Magyabang lang kayo ng konti.
Yeah, but I do,
What did you accomplish?
Yeah.
I do think that it starts with the belief.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so coming from different backgrounds, we didn't know all of these, business rules.
Right.
And we weren't trained for it. So that made us creative, and that made us imaginative. And over the years, it's been challenged. And then every now and then, some other businessman will make a comment to me and say, oh, you're going to have to spend more on labor and all of these things. And I get surprised that, what seemed like common sense to me about economics and about taking care of people and making money is not how they operate. So that made me think, like, what economic beliefs do they have that are so different from mine? And I realized it's so different because, in capitalism, the ones that have power will reinforce that system, whereas we don't like that system. That's our starting point. So we have different beliefs, and just because foundationally we're already so different,
Yeah.
we have to safeguard it even more. So our vision and our story has to be clearer than everyone else's. And I think that's why, we won't stop talking about this, and we'll always see ourselves as storytellers. And we see ourselves as main characters in a story that is unfolding.
Yes.
And when we make decisions, we're saying what will make everybody else turn that page.
On the topic of story, like when you said, like, what do you think the success is? Like, a lot of people will be tempted to look at the fact that we have a line with hundreds of people in it over the course of a day. And that's true. That's a business success. But that is only page one of the story, or that's just the cover of the story. And we don't judge books by the cover of a successful business. We have to open that book and understand what it is. And when you open the book, that's when you start to unfold the story and the elements and the characters. And I think that the success of El Union, the company, is that we refuse to let the story begin and end with just the partners. Because like that's what capitalism is. It's a story that begins and ends with name of billionaire. And everything serves that person's interest. It begins and ends with name your politician. And it ends with that the story, that's its limit. And with us, we refuse to hold the story hostage. We refuse to say that the story is just about me, Amy, and our kids. The story has to extend to others, otherwise that's not an ecosystem. Because ecosystems are self-propagating.
Right.
And we are people of ecological metaphor.
Yes,
We are
yes.
people who see ourselves not as conquerors of nature, but as part of it, as participants in nature. And that's exactly why the world is in trouble, is because we've divorced ourselves, we've separated ourselves from what we really are, which is organisms on this ecological thing, right?
Right.
In this natural environment, and we've tried to resist it with the commercial life. And it's just, and what the world is telling us is you're gonna lose. We're gonna shake you off. We're gonna heat this up. We're gonna raise the water because you're messing with things.
Right.
And that's a way of nature, right? Like nature is self-correcting, and we've just found that the more we try to mimic nature, the
more successful.
Yeah, the more successful it is. So I do tend to like fly off on weird imaginations like
Yeah,
that.
no,
But
not at all.
I think that a secret to the success is that we've told a story in ecological terms, and
Yeah.
we've refused to leave people behind.
Well,
Yeah, or
talk
we
about
try our best.
religion, right? Like do unto others as you would have them do unto you. We were taught this in elementary school, right?
And
Our kind of like post-religious version of that is none of us are free until all of us are free.
Wow.
So for example, like someone will ask Ami for a raise, let's say.
Yeah.
And Ami will say, I hear you, and I do believe you deserve a raise. But what she would say is like, now how can we give everybody a raise? We can solve this problem for you as long as we're all solving it for each other. And that's the only way this thing is gonna work.
the company is 60%
Right.
owned by the people you manage.
Right.
Is
So
that- yeah.
Yeah. So just to be again transparent on Rappler, like
Is that bad? Should I know?
no, not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. Yeah, we are labor owned.
Yeah.
This year.
But you decided this.
Yeah,
so
we
you
determined
evolved
this.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. So the majority of our company is owned by people who work in the company on a daily basis. Of course, Ami and I as founders, we do have a founding share.
Right.
In that. However, the rules that we're building towards, and if you look at the trend of our company, it's to democratize ownership of the company. Is to create a system that is
Sounds so idealistic.
It is.
Yeah.
It is, but we're also 10 years in.
Right,
We're not
right.
newbies. Yeah.
I think, starting a business and owning like 10% and talking about equity and shareholders, that's also idealistic. Like that's a future thing. Do I feel it right
Actually-
now that I have 30% of a company that's making business somewhere?
Yeah.
It's also idealistic. We're just choosing.
A different mythology.
Yeah.
We're just choosing a different language.
Like
right?
what? Like is that a
I would say like we
it's not capitalism in the old way.
Yeah.
How does it fit into old words? It's not
I mean, we're definitely, if there's anything about our business approach, we're anarchists.
yeah.
Basically, we're world building.
Yeah.
you decided to create the world you
Yeah.
want to
Or
live in.
one of our favorite analogies is in the shell of the old ... It's like, we're here. We are calling out that we are a commercial venture.
Right.
We started at a different point where we were much more commercially minded at the start.
Yeah.
And as time went on, we started to learn things about what actually works. which is distribution, which is equity, which is
Right.
fairness,
Right.
transparency. You know, third wave coffee prides itself in traceability and transparency. And yet the only thing, well, the biggest thing that people are taking from it is that it's bougie, expensive, high quality. But high quality is because it was equitable.
Correct.
And we're leaving out the totality of the story is a human story.
Yes.
With humans in nature, working with trees, working with ecology to create something that
And
hopefully pushes us forward.
You've taken this all through the supply chain, right? That's part
Yeah,
of
so
what
we've-
you've done differently in La Union.
Right. Aside from expanding ownership of our company to include our staff, and again, that's an enterprise that we will govern together as in the future. Another perspective we choose to taking from third wave coffee, where it's about traceability, about direct trade, transparency. We believe that those values should transpose to other realms of business, right? Transparency should not just be about where you bought your coffee. Like, you don't just slap the face of a farmer on, you also pay your staff better. You don't run them to the bone, right? Like, we're proud to say that our average time is 6-hour workday. And this at wages that we believed in the national minimum wage currently at 750 pesos, right? Like, we believe that that's where you start. So our cleaner makes that, right? And that's where we begin. And the reason we talk about that is because if we leave it in the theoreticals and we don't show our playbook, then how are we supposed to move forward?
Yeah.
Right? When good people shouldn't be shy about the good things that they do.
Right.
Like, we should talk about them honestly, right?
Yes.
Say, you know, another thing about a good story is that it always has the potential to fall off the cliff.
Yeah.
Right?
That's the
That's
risk.
that's a
risk
gripping
to believe
story.
in the goodness
Right.
of human
And,
nature.
and I think that's the other side. Like, we can get idealistic as well, but there is a nihilistic side to it. Like, we could screw up big time and take a group of people down with us.
But you're actually expanding.
We are. But we are.
Yeah. It works as a business, guys.
We're testing it even more. I mean, you know, like, a lot of food and beverage people will immediately say it's impossible. 100 pesos an hour, 30 hours a week, spending that much on people, caring about who made your coffee, and paying farmers their asking price, which is probably, you know, we don't bargain, and every year it gets more and more expensive. It would be impossible, and someone would write it off immediately, right? But we've done it, and we said, like, oh, we're not in the red. So just by the power of believing that this is how business should be run, we attempted it.
Yeah.
And it's still
it
working.
works.
Right.
You know,
So
I mean,
there's
that's the
no
best
secret
evidence.
There's
of
no
it,
secret
right?
sauce to it.
Yeah.
Actually, if you think about it, a lot of our decisions, we just think that there are, you know, set economic
laws almost.
yeah. But the truth is, these are models that people kind of like follow.
Yeah.
And so it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you believe in this economic model and you behave accordingly, then the outcome will be according to the model. But if you believe something else, the outcome might be different, and that's what's happened.
So it has been successful. It's been 15 years that you've been doing.
Oh, the company's 10 years old.
10 years old. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but yet, you know, you operate in a country that has endemic corruption, with people who have been, in many ways, right, like, have people disappointed you through this, right? How do you deal with that? How do you deal with the environment that you operate in? You could have these ideals.
Yeah.
Obviously, it works, all right? So I
Right.
want to know, how did you make it happen?
First of all, I think it helped to be away from Manila. Manila can really grind you down. I mean, I grew up here.
Right.
And even now when we visit, it's like pressing in on me, like, you know, the traffic and seeing people lined up, you know, working hard and barely having anything. It can get you jaded in one day, basically. So removing ourselves from that context, going to a small town where people are still nice, like they smile at you. They don't look at you like you're out to get something from them. And that's where we live. That's where our daily life is, where people are having fun in the water every day, smiling, and even the tourists are there, and there's this air of gratefulness for their life because they're on break. So being there, it feeds us. And so that's the fuel for being idealistic, I think.
It almost fertilizes you, right? It's kind of like we've planted ourselves in fertile soil. We've chosen a place where we feel we're predisposed to thrive. Now, it's easy to say that 10 years in. We tell our friends, you're so lucky that you moved to La Union and in year one, you've interior designed your place. We didn't have a bed until our third child was born. Like, we lived on mattresses on the floor and did proper startup mode with 3 children eventually in tow. And that story is like, that's where the wealth is. Those stories.
I think if you watch what you feed your imagination, the things that feel impossible in this oppressive, capitalistic, corrupt environment, it doesn't feel like it's gonna last forever. If you have other sources for your imagination.
Like uso ngayon yung mga shows like The Bear and Ted Lasso, and they take or like we enjoyed Daisy Jones, the rock star thing on Amazon, but the narratives that we're starting to see, even out of mainstream media and filmmaking and TV, is mental health and how this is a value for the future. And one of the things that we learned through our own mental health journey is, Ami actually brought this to me, is the interior locus of control. It's the sense that you happen to the world, and the world isn't happening to you. And just that position, just that perspective that I happen to the world. Like when I walk into this room, Kiddo arrives at the room, the room didn't arrive at Kiddo, and he's not at the mercy of the room.
Right.
Just that stance, it's just a stance, is helpful. The fact that you can do something, even in a small way. We're not doing anything great. There are 30 people in this organization. It's not 300. It's not 3,000. It's not 50. It's 30 people. We're talking about one coffee shop. And it could still fail.
No, but beyond that is the community you've built around you. Like our former digital person, the digital marketing person of Rappler was part of this community. Milk making chocolate, right? It's really like a back to basics, back to values.
Well, it's practice. It's kind of like us saying, let's simplify. Let's practice something. Like for me, the practice was making coffee and hosting.
Right.
And
the things
given enough time, you just practice. You put in the hours, and then you get good at coffee, it turns out. And then you get good at marketing. You get good at business, about watching your bottom line. And before, it's nothing, it's not rocket science. You just start.
The ecosystem, other people have gravitated around
the story is compelling.
Community.
Because people see you take a 3 to 6 break and they're like, wait a sec, I can do that too.
Sunsets are the best. So this show is about like 2 big things: our nation and technology.
Okay.
You have successfully taken your dreams, you've made it a reality, you've built a community in La Union, you've built a business that sustains that community, and a set of values that almost don't seem Pinoy. Where do you see, how does this fit into, so now let's move forward, what role has technology played? And then the second one is, how can we use this to transform this nation?
Well, one of the first books that we bought when we were starting out in La Union was actually a monocle guide, How to Build a Nation.
Wow. Okay.
That's something that, I was also teaching in UP before, and before basically quitting life in Manila, I was trying to get a master's degree in sociology, precisely because I wanted to build a nation.
Right.
And years later, I realized that La Union and our company was my medium.
Yes.
And it's completely intentional. When we talk about our staff, about food, clothing, shelter, about dreaming of everyone having HMOs and about talking to our, our admin staff about their OFW parents being able to come home already. That is completely in the intention that how we imagine ourselves is how we imagine the Filipino nation. And what we want to solve for our little family is what we want to solve for every Filipino family.
Yeah.
And that is the proposal.
It's actually, we're really just modeling. We're making a model, a working model.
Yeah.
And we're not telling anybody to follow us. We're not prescribing it. We're just saying, we have a working model. That's it. We have a working model. It's fun. Look at us. It's fun, right? Look at us only because in order for this model to keep going, we need to sell a few things, right?
Right.
But profit is absolutely in the service of that, not just of the model, and the model is in the service of these human people,
Right.
And those human people are in the service of a neighborhood.
Right.
And that neighborhood is in the context of an environment that it should be serving as well. And that's like, a model is just an example, an analogy for like, maybe, what if? That's why we love stories,
Yeah.
That's why Netflix is so valuable, right? That's why, there's never been more content. That's why TikTok is so valuable, because that's why social media is so valuable. And it ties into your question about tech, right? What do, we always, one of our prompts is like, what, as a company, is to celebrate what the digital age has taken from us, right? Is to provide an answer to technology, not using technology. Technology can never enjoy a sunset. Technology can never enjoy a cup of coffee because it's not human, right? It's like everything that we are, it's on the other side of a line from technology. Not that we don't use technology, but we refuse to be the tools of our tools. We refuse to be at the mercy of the algorithm. In every way, like how we actualize this, from our personal life with our children, to how we try to watch our digital health, to not spending on ads because we don't like giving money directly to Zuckerberg. Let's take aim at exactly which billionaire we're talking about. We, instead of, it's not far out to imagine a different way of doing things. Since I mentioned like Zuckerberg and how do we answer questions related to nation and tech. So Amy answered about nation, where we just propose a model, like this family, this company, this way. Maybe other Filipinos agree with it. And thank you for the platform. We get to say that. For technology, we need to imagine a world where we are the ones riding technology. We're riding it, like it, where we are the ones in control of technology. And we do that by for example, and we're not close to it, but we haven't paid for a single ad in the history of our company. And yet we're the #1 most followed independent coffee company, along with Yardstick, funny enough, in the Philippines. Independent, right? We've never paid for ads. We've never done sponsored posts. We only tell a compelling story. And there's a way through the technological landscape using human language. There's a way to cut through the noise of technology, using things that we've had before that pre-exist technology, like a meal, like a cup of coffee, like a tomato, like we have farmer initiatives around tomatoes. We don't have to imagine our world on a phone. We have this imagination that's ecological, that's universal, that's massive, and we're limiting it to this 5-inch screen, right? And what that 5-inch screen can show us when there's this panorama, this 360-degree view, in everything, everywhere, all at once to experience, and we're just limiting it to what billionaires have said, to what technology can write in ones and zeros, when we can imagine, worlds that are regenerative, right? That don't need to burn things in order for it to keep going, right? And of course, there's no pure path, not for Rappler, not for El Union. There's no pure path through capitalism, right? But in the midst of that imperfection, we can be earnest. We can have heart. We can step up to the line and say, no, this is our limit. Like we're not selling our souls to technology. We're not selling our souls to the algorithm. We stand here. There's things that the algorithm can't do, like be liquid in a cup, be a sandwich in my mouth. It cannot do that.
march
Yet.
to sunset,
Well,
right? No,
yeah.
and celebrate our humanity, right?
Yeah.
Like,
And we just feel like there's a clue to the future there. It's like, it's easy to paint it in this really idealistic and beautiful, which it is. It's beautiful, it's idealistic, it's hopeful. There is this kind of shadow of cynicism, nihilism, like this could mess up big time. But the great thing about a story is that it just needs to be told, and then it was worth telling. That's it. There's no ROI on a story, right? There's only connection. There's only that it would be told again around another table. And if it was, then we're winning. And I think that that's why we kind of feel a bit undefeatable. One is because of privilege. Like the worst case scenario for us is a soft landing. And I think that this is not for those without privilege. This message is for those with privilege. Like, what are we doing with it,
right.
right? Like, what are we doing with our privilege?
The ripple, you actually downgrade the ripple that you've had in this community.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And for us, hopefully, again, the community is another story. Like that's got its own governance, its own cultures and subcultures. We don't control the community. We don't speak for it, but we stand in the middle of it and we embody a model. We plant a garden and that garden thrives. And when a garden is thriving, you can't help but stop and smell and look
Fantastic.
and appreciate, right? And I think that that's what this all is for us.
Well, that's perfect. That's perfect. So, Kiddo and Amy Cosio, El Union in La Union. This is Hold the Line, dream of a better world, and make it a reality. This is what they've done. I'm Maria Ressa. Thank you so much for joining us.